Number 5. Area 51, Nevada. Starting out our list, we have the most obvious entry. In the American state of Nevada, you will find no shortage of places to go on vacation. Despite being a desert, you will find locations like the Hoover Dam, Red Rock Canyon, and of course, the various casinos and attractions in Las Vegas. Of course, a location that you will not find yourself getting into is the military base located on the salt flats of Groom Lake, which is colloquially known as Area 51. For years, Area 51 has been the subject of conspiracy theories involving everything from government testing to UFO activity. Adding to its mystique is the fact that the US government wouldn't even officially acknowledge that it existed until 2013. Its official use is apparently the testing of experimental aircraft, but the level of security at the base is extremely high, even for a government base. Employees of Area 51 are flown in on a private airline known as Janet Airlines, with Janet being an acronym that stands for just another non-existent terminal. Some former employees have reported getting paid through private companies that they have no involvement with in order to avoid a paper trail linking them to the base. Some theories about the purpose of Area 51 include it being used to develop energy weapons for the Strategic Defense Initiative, to develop time travel technology, and most infamously, for studying, storing, and reverse engineering the remains of crashed alien ships, including those that were found at the Roswell crash site. As it is a closed-off and secret government facility, tourists are of course not allowed to get into the site, with signs around the perimeter promising prosecution and possibly even deadly force against trespassers. Of course, this hasn't stopped alien enthusiasts from making the journey to Nevada to see the number of Area 51 and alien-adjacent attractions, such as bus tours of the extraterrestrial highway, the Black Mailbox, and the outskirts of this secret government facility. Number 4. The Princess Theatre, Alberta. In the Canadian city of Edmonton, Alberta, there is no shortage of movie theaters, with multiple malls housing multiple multiplexes, enabling local cinema lovers to watch the latest in entertainment. However, for many years, the crown jewel for movie lovers in Edmonton was not the Cineplex in West Edmonton Mall, or even the Garneau Theatre, which shows independent and classic films. No, for many years, the most classic of the theaters was the Princess Theatre on White Avenue. Built in 1914 for a then staggering $75,000, this three-story single-screen theater would show moving pictures, concerts, and vaudeville acts, while also having a basement billiards parlor for those not interested in the shows. The theater was known for implementing extremely novel and modern elements, such as a fireproof projection room, an electric time projection clock, an electronic ticketing machine, forced air ventilation, and even refrigerated fountain beverages. The theater was soon drawn into economic hardship and was forced to construct rental apartments on the upper and lower floors. One of these apartment renters was soon met with a tragic and disturbing end. According to local legend, an engaged woman lived in one of the upper apartments, but mere days before she was due to be wed, she was scorned by her fiancé. She was found hanging from the rafters while dressed in her wedding dress. In the years that followed, employees and patrons of the princess reported seeing a ghostly woman wearing a white dress who would suddenly appear and disappear, ascending the theater's grand staircase, wandering its ornate gold-leafed halls, or even hovering over the projection room. The princess was a staple for local cinema lovers, as well as fans of the paranormal for decades. But if you were interested in taking in a show or catching a glimpse of the ghostly bride, you may have missed your window, as the theater closed its doors after 108 years of operation in mid-2022. No new owners or plans for the historical theater have been announced, and the doors remained locked to the public, with only the ghosts still residing inside of this historic building. Number 3. Mount Weather Emergency Operations Center, Virginia. In a world that seems to constantly be on the brink of disaster, it is comforting to know that the US government has a safe location where the elite and powerful will be safe from destruction they most likely caused. Such is the purpose of the US Department of Homeland Security operated base located near Bluemont, Virginia. The Mount Weather Emergency Operations Center, otherwise known as the High Point Special Facility, has been in operation since the late 1800s, when it was used as a simple weather station. In 1928, the observatory building became President Calvin Coolidge's summer White House, before being used as a civilian public service facility where conscientious objectors could serve the government during World War II without having to go into conflict. In 1959, an underground facility was completed and designated Area B. The other buildings that were referred to as Area A became training facilities for the Federal Emergency Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA. Around this time, it became a relocation site for high-level civilian and military officials in the event of a national disaster, such as an attack or massive natural disaster. It plays a major role in many of the United States government's contingency plans for maintaining the continuity of government. It has a high-frequency radio system, which connects it to most federal public safety agencies, which allows the president to access and use the emergency alert system so that they can broadcast emergency alerts or warnings. An example of its use was on September 11, 2001, when the majority of congressional leadership were taken from Washington by helicopter and evacuated to Mount Weather. The National Art Gallery has also developed a program that would have the country's most valuable paintings helicoptered over to the facility in the event of an attack, in order to make sure important cultural pieces are preserved in the event of an attack that would otherwise destroy them. Obviously, this site is off limits to all but the most high level of people, and it is not open for tourists. But if you are nearby and see a large group of frantic-looking officials arriving by helicopter, or you see a message on TV from the president being broadcast from this facility, be very afraid, as it means that something terrifying and horrible has or is about to occur. Number 2. Boblo Island Amusement Park, Ontario. North America has no shortage of amusement parks for families and thrill seekers alike to visit. The Canadian province of Ontario has several to choose from, including Canada's Wonderland, Great Wolf Lodge, and Splashdown Niagara. One theme park that you won't be able to buy a ticket for, however, is the Boblo Island Amusement Park, located on the island of Bois Blanc, just above the mouth of the Detroit River. The park was opened in 1898 and used a ferry system to service guests from Ontario and Detroit and bring them to the island, where they had a variety of attractions to keep them occupied and having fun. Some of these included the Falling Star, a log flume, a theater, a sky tower, a Ferris wheel, a zoo, a carousel, and a dance hall, financed by Henry Ford himself. It also had 3 roller coasters: the Screamer, the Nightmare, and the Sky Streak. It also had Boblo's scoot boats, which were essentially aquatic bumper cars. The park operated for many years before eventually closing down for financial reasons in late 1993. There are still ferries that operate in order to get island residents on and off the island, but the now abandoned amusement park has been declared off limits by the property owners. Of course, the dilapidated carousel building, dance pavilion, and sky tower have since proven to be too appealing for urban explorers to keep away from, and the eerie, overgrown site still sees a variety of visitors. Like any good amusement park, it of course has a reputation for being haunted by a variety of ghosts. My personal favorite of the ghost stories is the story of Smiley the Magician. Back when the theater still operated and showed a variety of different performers, one of the most consistently booked performers of the 30s and 40s was a magician named Smiley Smilovich. Smiley was an old-school magician who had trained with Houdini in the late 20s and was known for his seemingly death-defying tricks. One of his most famous tricks was a metamorphosis trick, where he would put a trunk on stage, climb into it, lock it, and then have the trunk set on fire. He would escape through a trap door, the trunk would burn away, revealing that he had escaped, and the crowd would go wild. One day he was doing this trick as usual, but when he locked himself in the trunk, he had a heart attack and died. The trunk was set on fire, and the audience was left in terror as Smiley's body burned in front of them. Ever since then, Smiley's ghost would apparently haunt the theater, being sighted watching shows that were performed there, showing a special interest in magic shows. In the years since the park's closure, the occasional rumor of the magician being spotted has come up from the various urban explorers checking out the overgrown buildings. Would you ever be brave enough to explore Boblo Island Amusement Park? And if you did, would you be on the lookout for spectral magicians? Number 1. North Brother Island, New York. The North Brother Island is one of 2 small islands located in the East River of New York City. The island remained uninhabited until 1885, with the only trace of humanity being a small lighthouse that was erected in 1869. The island began seeing more use in 1885 when the Riverside Smallpox Hospital moved from Roosevelt Island to North Brother, when their mission expanded to treating and isolating victims of other quarantinable diseases such as typhoid, tuberculosis, and especially polio. In 1904, a steamship called the General Slocum was set ablaze, and over 1,000 people perished, either from the fire or from drowning while trying to escape, and ended up washing ashore on the island. One of the most famous residents at the hospital was Mary Mallon, otherwise known as Typhoid Mary, who was confined on the island for 20 years until her death in 1938, after having been declared a public health menace for infecting between 51 and 122 people while working as a cook. As public health health measures like vaccines began to be adopted in the 30s and 40s, the need for a quarantine hospital lessened to the point where the hospital was closed. It was converted into housing for war veterans who were going to school in the city following World War II, before being converted into a rehabilitation facility for young people suffering from substance abuse issues. But it was closed in 1963 due to the cost of upkeep and the widespread corruption of the staff. In the years since, it was considered for a variety of purposes, including housing for the homeless and an extension of the jail at Rikers Island. But the danger of the unmarked manholes and the advanced dilapidation of the buildings, which are mostly collapsed and overrun by poison ivy, resulted in such ideas being abandoned. It was eventually decided that the site would serve as a bird sanctuary for herons and other wading shorebirds. Although many of the original 25 buildings are still standing in some shape or form, it has been made off limits to the public and is only available for supervised visits for those intending to go ashore for, quote, compelling academic and scientific purposes. With its history of confinement and death, perhaps it is best that this site has been deemed unfit for public visitation, although the history of the island is indeed compelling.
Number 5. Leap Castle. For 700 years, Leap Castle has proudly stood in Ireland, boasting a rather infamous reputation as the most haunted castle in the world, which I feel is a title it must have really fought hard for. I mean, Dracula had a castle, that's gotta be the most haunted castle. The castle was first built in the 13th century, home to the O'Bannon clan, but it would be adopted by the ruling O'Carroll clan, who seized control of it completely by the 15th century. From here, ownership would pass from father to son, but was punctuated by blood. Rival clans, wars, and even family member assassinations were all par for the course of Leap Castle's bloodied history. A grim oubliette where prisoners would be pushed from a window, landing into a pit of spikes, really completed the castle. After centuries of battles and brawls over the castle, it would eventually be burned in 1922 during the Irish Civil War, where it was then abandoned. Now, it goes without saying that a castle that saw as much bloodshed as this is home to a bevy of trapped spirits. The most present one is the Bloody Chapel spirit. Legend has it that one of the O'Carroll children had his own brother assassinated to gain power. His brother, a member of the clergy, is said to restlessly wander the burnt-out chapel. Visitors report seeing beams of light, the smell of burnt rubber, and the shadow of a priest in the stairwell. There's reports of a spirit of a young girl named Emily, who fell from the rampart in the 16th century and tragically lost her life. There's stories of people seeing the ghost of a young girl walking atop the battlements, dragging a misshapen leg as she walks. Today, you can try to visit the Leap Castle if you're feeling daring enough to contact the owner Sean Bryan, who does offer private tours. It'll be you, him, and all the spirits the castle has to offer. And hey, if you're looking for a vacation to a haunted spot but you don't want to leave your room, why not subscribe to Top 5 Scary? We got more haunted sites than you could visit in a lifetime, and we're just a click away. Moving on. Number 4. Separate prison. Going to prison probably sucks. I've never been, but I have heard bad things. A regular prison is pretty bad enough without the wardens getting too creative with their punishments, and then there's prisons like Australia's infamous separate prisons, where it seems like they were trying to set a world record for cruelty. Built in 1833, it was going to serve as a home for some of England's toughest crooks who had to be shipped all the way down under. A home for the toughest criminals needed to be pretty tough, right? Well, unfortunately, it was. Just in the psychological sense, not physical. Separate prison was inspired by the philosophical concept of the panopticon, a template for a prison where all prisoners would be seen under one watchtower. Inmates were to only ever be referred to by the numbers sewn on their uniforms, and were to wear black hoods at all times they weren't in their cells to help them better reflect on their crimes. I'm sure that went over swimmingly with a bunch of violent criminals. Well, it didn't. It mostly led to inmates going mad or offing each other in the hopes that capital punishment was preferable to being imprisoned there, which is a sign that your system is working. Look, it probably goes without saying that this is a haunted prison now, right? I mean, there's over 1,000 bodies buried in unmarked graves on an island that held a prison where everyone had to wear dark hoods. There's no way it's not haunted. Well, it's on this list, so it is. The prison is now owned by Australia's Parks and Wildlife Services, who offer ghost tours of the grounds, where visitors report all sorts of hauntings. Screams, wailings can be heard wandering through the halls, rocking chairs moving by themselves during the night. There's an option on the prison's website to take a tour with just a lantern to guide you, if you're feeling particularly brave. Number 3. Akigara Forest. Akigara Forest is often known as the Sea of Trees. It's a hauntingly beautiful park in Japan that carries a dark reputation. Hundreds of people over the years have come to Akigara to take their own life, leading to its infamous and dark distinction. Spiritualists and paranormal investigators in Japan believe that because there have been so many tragic deaths that happened in Akigara, the forest itself is literally growing denser, and the paranormal activity and dark energy inside as well. This seemingly serene forest has been host to all kind of dark rumors, with some stating that the forest is hallowed ground, haunted by demonic spirits for years. Others claim that the forest drives people to madness due to high deposits of iron, which cause compasses to malfunction, meaning travelers would get hopelessly lost. Some visitors to Akigara Forest report hearing screams, wallowing, or crying while walking through the trees. There's no doubt that there's probably a very dark feeling walking through these trees, knowing everything that's ever transpired there. As well, there's something about the knotted mess of all the branches and bark that seems sort of surreal, not quite of this earth, but maybe that's just the legends doing the work for me. Japanese authorities have been doing their best to try and reclaim the forest's haunted reputation, putting up signposts all over to try and deter anyone who would take their own life to instead reach out, call for authorities, and they're no longer publicizing any cases of this happening, hoping to one day salvage the tormented reputation of an otherwise serene spot. Number 2. Poveglia. I've talked about Poveglia on this channel before, and I almost kind of can't resist bringing it up again because I just find it so fascinating. Describing Poveglia sounds like Italy was intentionally trying to make the setting to a horror movie. It's just off the coast of Venice. Initially, the island served as a quarantine zone for those suffering from the plague. Infected were shipped off to Poveglia to wait out their final days. The trouble was, a lot of the people who would end up getting sent to Poveglia weren't even sick at all, showing minor to no symptoms at all. However, that probably changed pretty quickly once they were sent to a quarantine zone of exclusively sick people. It's said that the ground on Poveglia is so hallowed that there's more ash from human remains than there is soil on the island. Eventually, in 1922, Poveglia underwent a bit of a rebranding, since centuries of being known as the quarantine zone was hurting its image and its tourist economy, and it rebranded as an island home to a mental hospital. Now, of course, this mental hospital was home to doctors who performed sick experiments on their patients, often with little to no care for the patient's well-being. Chisels, drills, lobotomies without any form of anesthetic or proper treatment, all these fun things. It's said that the lead doctor at the facility was eventually so overcome with guilt over what he had done and haunted by the screams and spirits of his patients and victims that he would eventually throw himself off of the tower on the center of the island. Now, to deter all you would-be ghost hunters and paranormal enthusiasts out there who think Poveglia is sounding like the holy grail of haunted spots, I should warn you that you are probably not going to get in there, as it is extremely forbidden to enter, as in it's illegal. It's punishable to the fullest extent of the law and is considered a criminal act to trespass onto Poveglia. But a better question is, why would you even want to? Some spirits are better left unbothered. At the number 1 spot is Pripyat, the town outside of Chernobyl, the famed nuclear reactor. 50,000 people used to live here, and now it's a ghost town. Sorry, couldn't resist. It's difficult to summarize just exactly what happened in Chernobyl in under a 2-minute time frame, but you know, we can gloss over some of the big details for you. An overload at a nearby reactor caused a nuclear meltdown that ended up causing one of the worst ecological disasters in human history. A massive chain of unfortunate events had to all happen for the incident to play out the way it did, and unfortunately that's exactly how it went. It's a fascinating case, and there are tons and tons of documents and things to read about it, and you should after this video because it's fascinating. 50,000 people had to be evacuated basically overnight, and Pripyat turned into a ghost town, now standing as a harrowing monument to the dangers of unchecked nuclear power. Photos from inside Pripyat almost don't look real. They look like something out of a post-apocalyptic movie, and I guess that kind of makes sense because it is post-apocalyptic when you think about it. Unlike a lot of the others on this list, Pripyat doesn't need any supernatural ghost stories to elicit a sense of fear. It's haunted, definitely, but more so by radiation and unease than anything else. Mutated animals and vegetation, abandoned Ferris wheels, and an unmissable sense of dread in the air certainly paint a picture of one of the Earth's darkest spots. To some, Pripyat is the ultimate dark tourist destination, infamous and wholly unique. There's actually a whole subculture around venturing into the zone for recreation, a group of people who call themselves stalkers after the 1972 film and not the first-person shooter RPG series set in Chernobyl. These people illegally trespass into the surrounding areas of Chernobyl for the the ultimate urban exploration thrill. Now, there are guided tours as well of Chernobyl's surrounding areas for those who are less familiar with the dangers of the zone, but want to get up and close and personal nonetheless.
Number 5. Chateau de Montségur, a petite and quaint fortress in southern France, sitting atop a 170-meter drive uphill. Its ruins now nothing but rock and rubble, but once a safe house for the Cathars. The Cathar vision of the universe was dualist, in that good and light confronts evil and darkness. Right? Pretty straightforward. Very Jedi of them. This belief led them to follow a very disciplined way of life. Before, of course, they were decimated from the Catholic Church, initiated by Pope Innocent III. Innocent, huh? The ruins nicknamed now Satan's Synagogue. Yeah, nice and light right off the top, huh, Kyle? Described as one of the last Cathar castles and has been listed as a monument historique by the French Ministry of Culture. Cathar, from Greek meaning pure. These people were devout. In 1233, the site became the seat and head of the Cathar Church. The fort roughly housed about 500 people during this time. In 1242, a military of about 10,000 troops fought against the castle that was held up by only 100 Cathars. So, like, very Jedi all of a sudden. The siege lasted 9 months, until 2 years later the castle finally surrendered. North of 200 Cathars were burned in a giant bonfire, unless they renounced and changed their faith, some taking the Cathar vow just weeks before this. Those who renounced the Cathar faith were allowed to leave, but the castle itself destroyed. The field below, now famously known to have been where hundreds of men and women were burned alive. The apparent bonfire that happened sparked a curse from the Cathar peoples. Legends of these ruins say any person who strays off the marked footpaths of these ruins and loses their footing will drop off of every side of the citadel in the sky. Sounds more like a metaphor to me than a curse. Number 4. Kalaupapa. In 1866, during the reign of Kamehameha V, Hawaiian officials passed a law designating this island the official site for patients affected with leprosy. Kalaupapa, a small peninsula in the north shore of Molokai, has quite a bitter and spooky history. The king exiled those who contracted Hansen's disease here, noting it was the ideal spot, secluded and surrounded by the highest cliffs in the world. The peninsula served as a natural outdoor prison, accessible only by one steep path by foot or boat to shore. About 1,200 families were exiled to quarantine here. At the time, the disease wasn't really understood, believing it to be very incurable. Whisked off and locked away amid paradise in total isolation. No amenities, no buildings, or even potable water. Known by historians who visit it as, quote, the pit of hell itself. And apparently the most cursed place on Earth. Yeah, I didn't know that. With its grim history of loneliness, despair, and death, it's not really surprising at all that Kalaupapa is said to be one of the most haunted places in all of Hawaii. This island was basically a death sentence for those on it. Shackles, cages, caves. Sounds about right to be haunted by the afterlife. Number 3. The Vanishing Village. Way up north, a village named after a bountiful, massive freshwater lake in Canada's Nunavut. 1932. A Canadian fur trapper and explorer went to the village of Anjakuni Lake. The people's known there for their markets of elaborate fish and extensive wine. This village was a staple for most on the map. Joe LaBelle, a well-known fur trapper and well-known in the village, had an otherworldly sight when he arrived. He arrived and sensed something was a little wrong, a little too quiet, too foggy. He found that the village was completely emptied and deserted, even though there were lots of signs of life still present. Campfires blazing, pots still boiling, doors were even open, and food out waiting to be served. Thousands of Anjakuni villagers had simply vanished. He sent a telegraph to the closest RCMP office and told them about his account. And here's the scary part. They launched an official investigation which was never solved. They took a testimony from another trapper and his 2 sons who said they saw a large cylindrical object transform into a bullet shape before flying directly over Anjakuni Lake. At the village, the police found the kayaks were still on the beach, meals still in the early stages of rot, and apparently the headstones were even stacked neatly in piles on either side of the graves. Okay? To this day, there's no proper explanation for this mass disappearance of people and the hundreds of empty graves. Number 2. Skeleton Lake. Deep within the Himalayas of India lays the bay of an ancient lake, shrouded by an ancient mystery. Rupkund Lake. famously known as Skeleton Lake. It was rediscovered by the British Forest Rangers in 1942, and what they found was pretty jarring. Hundreds of ancient human skeletons found at the edge of the lake. Investigations led some to think that this was a catastrophe of some sort, or the remains of a legendary event where a group was suddenly killed in a violent storm around the 9th century. Nope! 3 different groups of people died here all at different times. It's not located on or near a trade route, no evidence of any ancient bacteria pathogen, ruling out diseases. Yeah, this one's really weird. One group of people had genetics to present-day South Asia, while the other group related to the people of Central Europe. And finally, a group particularly from the Greek island of Crete. But how? All here? They found the bones and deaths were genetically separated in time by as much as 1,000 years difference. Wooden artifacts, iron spearheads, even slippers and jewelry were found by the National Geographic team who studied 30 skeletons in 2003. Skin still on some of them. Ugh. 300 people have been found so far. Legend goes, Parvati, a supreme goddess, cursed the kingdom, unleashing drought and disaster upon them. She sent down a blizzard of hail and whirlwind which swept the people into the lake. Their skeletons are a warning to those who disrespect the goddess. I mean, maybe. The skeletons are visible in the clear water of the shallow lake during 1 month when the ice melts. That's terrifying. I'm gonna chicken out right now and just never visit this place. Just show up and get Jack Skellingtoned? Are you kidding me? No way, dude. And number 1, the City of Screams. Top of my relaxing trip list, Golgotha City, Afghanistan. Peaceful once as it was the capital of the Ghorid people, until Genghis Khan and the Mongol Empire seized it in about the 12th century. Apparently legend goes its ruler, Jalaluddin Mangburnu, fought back and apparently killed Khan's grandson in battle. Yeah, probably not a good idea. In 1221, Khan sent his 15-year-old Mudu Khan here to claim and siege, who in turn was shot and killed with an arrow, precipitating the siege of Bamyan. At first, the city held strong, but was apparently sold out by the ruler's daughter, who, according to legend, betrayed the castle's secret entrance, sharing and consorting with the enemy. Expecting to be rewarded, her and her people were unfortunately slaughtered, and the ruins cursed, of course. The Russians, the Taliban, and the Americans have all used these ruins as fighting posts over the years, as this place hasn't been lived in since. But through them is apparently very haunted, the ruins subject to those who still hear the screams of the fallen. Yeah. Terrifying. Haunting sounds of screaming and warfare are echoed here, thus giving it its famous name of the City of Screams. Dark horseback figures to even full-on uniformed specters are seen atop the rubble. Yeah, I'd just say we just avoid this place completely and just kind of back away slowly out of respect, you know?
Number 5. Island of the Dolls. The Island of the Dolls is a peculiar small island just off the coast south of Mexico City. The island is covered, well, absolutely blanketed in hanging dolls. Just about everywhere on the small landmass. I probably don't even need to really delve into any of the lore behind this island for you to believe that it's cursed. You can just take a look at it and understand. I mean, it's a secluded, abandoned island inhabited exclusively by dilapidated dolls. What do you need? Don Julian Santana Barrera was a man who had isolated himself from the rest of Mexico City, choosing instead to live alone on this small, meager island. His world would be thrown upside down when he discovered a body laying on the shore one day. Shortly following the discovery, a doll washed up on shore as well, having come in from the channel. This event would change Barrera's life forever. Barrera hung the doll up on the island, believing that this would appease the spirit of the girl and set her free. Well, either it didn't work, or he believed he needed a bit of extra protection, because for the rest of his life, Barrera made it his mission to hang as many dolls as he could across the island, scavenging them from the channel, some from the trash, wherever he could find them, until the island's reputation preceded it, and what was once a small, private residence became the infamous Island of the Dolls. Barrera's story would be cut short in 2001, when his body was discovered in the channel floating, just like the doll all those years ago. But his legacy far from ended there. The island has become a notorious tourist destination, only attainable by a boat out of Mexico City. While most guides are happy to take you, there are some who outright refuse the journey for fear of spirits. It's said that if you are to visit, it's best to bring a doll, to appease whoever could still be living there. Ugh. I kinda ran a tingle down my spine, and that's just number 5. Now if you want more stories like that, we have them coming every single day, hot and fresh. All you've got to do is subscribe and creep on creeping on. Let's keep going. Number 4. The Stanley Hotel. Who doesn't love a nice stay at a good hotel, you know? Someone to tend to your needs, breakfast ready for you wake up, and a TV where you'll flick through the channels for half an hour before settling on Ghostbusters 2 because that's the only thing that's on. Let me introduce you to the Stanley Hotel, one of America's most beautiful resorts. Built in 1909 next to the picturesque Rocky Mountains in Colorado, the Stanley Hotel is a great place to get away from it all. It's isolated away from the rest of the world, and if you're starting to wonder why this hotel seems a bit familiar to you, maybe if I called it the Overlook Hotel, it might come together? Yeah, the Stanley Hotel is the original inspiration for the Overlook Hotel from The Shining. Stephen King found the inspiration for his famous haunted hotel after spending a cursed night in room 217, the haunted room from the novel. Amusingly, while the Stanley Hotel served as the actor of sorts for the Overlook in the TV series, it didn't for Stanley Kubrick's legendary adaptation. In that, the hotel standing in for the Overlook asked that room 217 not be used in the film, as it was a real operating room and the hotel was afraid it would lose business, so they changed it to the non-existent room 237 for the legendary Kubrick picture. Now, I could do IMDb trivia about Stanley Kubrick movies all day. What makes the Stanley Hotel so scary? Well, it goes without saying that it's said to be a haunted hotel. All manners of hauntings have been reported. Eerie laughter, unexplained noises, ghostly apparition, things moving on their own, and so forth. Now, the Stanley Hotel embraces its status as a haunted hotel with gleeful open arms. Ghost hunters are invited to stay in their spirited rooms that are purported to have higher levels of supernatural activity. Unsurprisingly, these are the most booked rooms in the entire hotel. Stephen King recounts that the direct events that inspired The Shining was that while he was visiting the hotel, he was terribly afraid of its isolation and its eeriness, describing eating alone in its giant dining hall, hearing quiet orchestral music played over the speakers in a room distant. Apparently, staying there gave him terrible nightmares of his son being chased by some invisible presence. He says as soon as he woke up from the first one, he lit a cigarette and began to write The Shining then and there. Now, my advice for you if you ever take a trip to the Stanley Hotel, make sure you got lots and lots to keep yourself busy with, but make sure you get some time to play. You know what they say about all work and no play, right? Number 3. Eastern State Penitentiary, Philadelphia. Now, some of the wisest men I've ever met have said that it's always sunny in Philadelphia. But if you were one of the doomed souls interred into Eastern State Penitentiary, it was anything but. Eastern State wanted to run things a little differently than the standard American prison system, dubbing their system of punishment the Pennsylvania system, or Whack and Use John's Philly style, depending on who was asking at the time. The Pennsylvania system refers to imposing the prisoners to solitary confinement all the time. Prisoners lived alone, exercised alone, ate alone, and were only ever accompanied by guards. When being escorted anywhere, the guards would put a black hood over inmates. Unsurprisingly, this was not a terribly popular system. It eventually collapsed inward on itself due to overcrowding, and the program was abandoned in 1913, just 5 years after the prison was constructed. Although this didn't really do much to improve conditions for the inmates there, and really just led the prison to come up with new terrible creative methods of inhumane treatment, such as chaining prisoners' tongues to their wrists, or strapping prisoners to chairs for days on end, dousing prisoners in freezing cold water, and putting the worst prisoners into a pit affectionately dubbed the Hole, where they'd be kept in the dark for weeks at a time. In 1970, after decades of terror, Eastern State closed its gates only to creep them back open as a tourist destination for dark tourists looking to go ghost hunting. A place like this is bound to be home to all sorts of rumors and spirits, right? Well, according to local legends, if you spend a night in Eastern State on one of their Halloween tours, you'll hear all kinds of disembodied laughter, screaming and crying, ghostly figures moving across the walls, and unexplained footsteps. Enjoy the sights. Just make sure the gate doesn't lock behind you. And while we're still on this one, does anybody else think that this could stand to be the best premise for an episode of Always Sunny, like, ever? The gang goes to jail, the gang gets haunted. If anybody knows Danny DeVito's agent, please DM us. Number 2, the Hellfire Club. Don't get too excited. The party won't be meeting Eddie Munson for a D&D session anytime soon at this Hellfire Club. The Hellfire Club in Dublin, otherwise known as Montpelier Hill, was once home to a hunting lodge in the 17th century, owned by one Richard Parsons, a man obsessed with black magic and the occult. It's said that the Hellfire Club was a club for Satanists, as the leader was referred to as the King of Hell and would dress like the devil himself during meetings. Every meeting of the Hellfire Club, they left one seat open at the table, just in case Lucifer wanted to drop by. Stories go on to say that members of the Hellfire Club participated in all manner of dark and sinister ritual, sacrificing cats, goats, and if the legends are to be believed, even servants of the Hellfire Club themselves were offered. Legend has it that one fateful day, a strange man appeared in the middle of the night and asked if he could join in at the card game that they were playing for the night. As there was always an open seat, they decided to offer it to him. During the game, a player dropped his cards, and when he went underneath the table to retrieve his hand, they saw that the strange man they had invited had hooves in place of feet, and upon rising from the table, the stranger had vanished into a burst of flame. The building was scorched and set ablaze in 1750, with many differing accounts as to what caused the flame. Some say it was the club itself that set the building on fire to give a more intimidating appearance and keep out outsiders. Some say the devil himself did it, and some say it was a duel that ended badly. Whatever the cause, the Hellfire Club relocated their activities sometime in 1760, and the original building is left empty, where it still stands today. You can visit it today, and it's a fairly popular tourist destination for urban explorers and paranormal investigators who want to see if maybe there's any residual black magic in the soil and walls there. Number 1. Poveglia. This list really has me all kinds of freaked out, reading about all these wretched places. I think we need to focus on a nice island getaway. Why not the island of Poveglia? The forbidden island off the coast of Venice. I knew it was going to be haunted. I wrote this list. Poveglia is an infamous island in Italian history, once serving as a quarantine zone and final resting place for the unfortunate victims of the Black Plague. As the plague ravaged Europe and paranoia set in across the lands, it was said that anyone who showed so much as the slightest symptoms were shipped off to Poveglia to live out the rest of their days. Oftentimes, these people would be sent away without even truly being sick, dooming them to a horrific fate. It's said that over 50% of the island's soil is made of burned human ash. That is terrifying. The ground itself is haunted. In the early 19th century, the island was converted from a quarantine zone to a just as terrifying mental asylum, switching gears a little bit because apparently being host to one setting for a horror movie wasn't quite enough. The asylum did nothing to improve Poveglia's haunted reputation. Instead of being home to the sick now, it was the home to droves of mentally disturbed patients who were made into unsuspecting victims by a doctor's experiments. Doctors at the asylum would impose their patients into lobotomies with no concern for sanitation or the victim's safety. The legend has it that the lead doctor at the asylum, who ran these twisted experiments, was so haunted by the spirits of his former patients that it drove him to such madness he cast himself over the tower of the island where his screams can still be heard. It's been said the island is home to countless tortured abandoned souls, still screaming. Now, if for some reason I told you all of that and you're thinking, I really want to visit, first of all, why? And second of all, you're gonna need to be pretty crafty, as the island is completely forbidden. You'll be pressed to the fullest extent of the law if you're caught trespassing into Poveglia. Not even remotely worth the risk, if you ask me. At best, you get arrested. At worst, I got no idea.
Number 5. Leap Castle. There are a ton of old haunted castles in Europe, isn't there? Like, that was someone's house at some point. You gotta think, those chamber pots have been used for like 1,000 years. Ugh, yuck. And of course, some dark and nasty history has gone down there at these places as well. You can feel it almost most of the time. Leap Castle, Ireland. Built around 1250. Our first stone cold stop. This place has seen its fair share of bloodshed. Not just one ghost story, and not just a foe, but a friend. Well, family, actually. One of the most lived in castles in Ireland. It's seen some It's housed many a family, generation after generation. Apparently built by the O'Bannon family, way back. Legend has it, 2 brothers dared each other to jump off a cliff for house rights. Yeah, more of a myth, I think. Then comes the O'Carroll family. Now we get into some actual literature. Father dies, powerful family, no successor to take the castle. However, this turned into yet another brother versus brother kinda duel. Couple stabbings around the castle's chapel, and enter stage left, lots of ghosts. Ruthless, right? The smell of burning and decay now apparently. The spirit of the murdered priest now lurks the stairwell, and often reported by staff as a slain brother. What's with the brothers thing? Among the ghostly figures is also Emily and Charlotte, the ghosts of 2 girls playing in the main hall circa 1600s era. The most famous afterlife resident, the Red Lady. There have been sightings of this creature for centuries. She roams in a long red dress, tall and lean. The Red Lady carries a huge dagger as well, with her hand raised. Can you imagine? Stone cold castle, middle of the night. Just scrolling through Instagram after a nice Airbnb night, and you look up to a red ghost lady holding a knife at you. Yeah, I would just like cartoon run on air, you know? Number 4, Keramakos. As always, if you like what we do here on Top 5 Scary, throw us a thumbs up down below or leave us a comment to ponder over. Halloween's just next week. Which haunted house does it for you? Churches do it for me, you know? Churches. I don't do creepy, creaky churches, you know? So many floorboards. Okay, so this planet is like old. We're finding things and sites that are literally changing history textbooks as we speak. Göbekli Tepe, Petra, like Syria and Turkey, these places are old, but Greece is like ancient old. Newsweek reported that in 2020, a collection of more than 30 inscribed tablets were found at the bottom of a 3,000-year-old Athenian well in the ancient cemetery of Keramakos. Yeah, scary enough, right? You see, these tablets bear individual curses and prayers to the Greek gods of the underworld. So all sorts of nasty energy just floating atop there. Juta Strazek, who led the excavation, said that whoever ordered the curses inscribed on the tablets was unnamed, but the black magic seen, heard, and felt at the site is present there for all to research. Even though back then black magic and the use of curses was forbidden in Greece during that time, which makes this even more horrifying. Just refound in 2016, the cemetery itself was first excavated in 1870 from the Greek ministry. Progress halted during World War II, and the excavation then lost momentum. The excavation site consists of a massive sanctuary holding thousands of precious artifacts. Keramakos comes from the Greek word for pottery or ceramics, arguably the most important cemetery of ancient Athens, riddled with the oldest tombs and curses that went along with them. There's always like adultery feuds too, isn't there? I curse thee, Demetria, for looking at my Adonis. Like lots of jealousy and lying back then, it seems. Number 3, Kaimuki House. This Halloween, if you're trick-or-treating, listen to old Uncle Kyle and do not go near this house. Located in the Kaimuki neighborhood of Honolulu, Hawaii, this place has a horrifying reputation. Apparently, murder and a most foul nature has occurred in the house, many times. Murder case after disappearance, the local stories became fiction. It's now known by locals as the most haunted place on the island. And here's why. The house itself looks like a normal, surf-friendly home. Yeah, not really. Enter stage right, the Kasha. The Kasha is a creature said to reside in the actual house. It's a man-eating ghost from Japanese folklore. Not just story, the events from the Kaimuki house have been documented. Well documented. Interpretations of the monster includes a ghoul who lives and feeds on the dead, a cat-like demon from the sky who steals away bodies. However, all three versions have one thing in common. It's hunger for corpses. Ooh. In 1942, police officers were called to the house by a woman who apparently kept repeating, "She's trying to get my children." Upon entering the house, the officers could do nothing but apparently watch in horror as the members of the family were all levitating and ragdolled and hurled across the room by an unknown force. The police were baffled and decided to just load everybody up in the car and leave the premises. The original Kaimuki house was torn down during the summer of 2016 and has since yet been under investigation and new construction. Okay. So no vacation in Hawaii this summer. Noted. Number 2, Ancient Ram Inn. Of course we needed an ancient old haunted inn, didn't we? Isn't this the start of like every great horror movie? The lights flicker in an old haunted inn in the middle of nowhere. The bell dings but no one answers. Should have been a writer. Well, luckily this is also a functioning pub, and it's located in Watton-under-Edge, a market town within the district of Gloucestershire, England. Look at this place. It's like bending and molding to the earth, like a fence that's grown around a tree. This thing is old. The inn has been owned and operated by many people, going back as far as 1,000 years, since like 1145. Hope they clean their beer taps. This inn was said to have been owned by the St. Mary's Church when first built. And of course, with that, it's haunted. The Ancient Ram Inn has been investigated by years of paranormal researchers. Television shows like Ghost Adventures and Most Haunted. The inn was investigated by UK paranormal study group, the Ghost Club, which is apparently the oldest paranormal research organization in the world. It's haunted. But what makes something haunted? Is it the age or the sinister events that happened in and around the premises? This land sits on the intersection of two lines that people think contain high spiritual energy. Using a map, of course, these lines trace directly to England's most sacred site, Stonehenge. Legend has it that the energy from Stonehenge feeds the property's paranormal power. Not to mention, the backyard is home to a 5,000-year-old pagan burial ground. Witches being burned at the stake on the property. Hey, if you see a pagan ghoul pouring himself a Guinness in the middle of the night, just say cheers and keep walking. Number 1, Bran Castle. It's October, so we're feeling extra spooky around here at Top 5 Scary. We're familiar with the classics, right? If we're not, go and binge some horror movie marathons, people. The castle of all castles, Dracula. Well, kinda. what Dracula was based off of, where he lived at least, also the National Monument of Romania itself. Fun fact. It doesn't get much more Halloweeny than this place, come on. Bran Castle is linked to the historical figure who inspired author Bram Stoker's creation of this half-bat, half-man. No, not Batman. Vlad III, Dracula, otherwise known as Vlad the Impaler. Don't panic, this was like a couple years back, like mid-1400s. We know this guy, and yes, you heard it right, the Impaler. I don't really need to get into much detail with this one. To impale. Google it. Some believe Bran Castle was one of the sites which Vlad reigned. Unfortunately, history says that he wasn't around here. In fact, it says that he was only imprisoned here for a little bit. Yeah, although there's no coffins inside. So what makes this place so scary? Apparently during Stoker's research to the region of Transylvania, he came across accounts of the atrocities committed by Vlad and used the Dracula name after studying him. And of course, this castle, built out of wood originally, somewhere around the 11th, 12th century, seems to be pretty fitting upon research of the old haunted castles territory. Unfortunately, this 1,000-year-old home isn't really a home anymore, just home to relics now, and the occasional cold breeze and fuzzy camera picture. Bran Castle acts as a museum now and a popular Halloween destination. Apparently they found a gold casket that houses the heart of Romania's Queen Marie in the walls. Yeah, that's pretty haunted castle material, no?
Number 5 on this list is Troy. Troy is one of the most famous cities ever to go missing. It's actually kind of crazy how Troy just seemed to vanish off of the surface of the earth, considering how much stuff went down there. Maybe the paranormal presence played into it though. The National Geographic says Heinrich Schliemann, the German archaeologist, was in Turkey in the late 19th century on an eccentric quest. He was excavating a Tellin artificial mound that covers long abandoned settlements. This site, known as Hisarlik, was familiar to only a few specialists, but as Schliemann dug, he was pinning his hopes on finding the ruins of the most famous city in classical literature, Troy. The trouble was that Troy might not have even existed. The acclaimed Greek poet Homer popularized the Trojans and their city in the Iliad and the Odyssey, his 8th century BC epic poems. These works told the story of a 10-year war between Greece and Troy, fought by such timeless characters as the kings of Priam and Agamemnon, the warriors brave Hector and mighty Achilles. The poems tell of bloody battles, fantastic adventures, heroic deeds, and tragic consequences. But was Troy a real place? Schliemann set out to prove it was, and he did. Hisarlik is now widely accepted as the setting for Homer's epic tales. Studies have revealed that the 30-meter, 100-foot tall mound contains not just one but 9 Troys, each built over the ruins of the one before. Today, archaeologists consider Troy the 6th counting from the bottom up to be the likeliest candidate for Homer's Troy. This city dates from around 1700 to 1250 BC, and its citizens lived in dynamic times. If you've read even the tiniest bit of Homer's epic poems or seen the movie adaptation with Brad Pitt in it, then you know that these battles were bloody ones. People died here at Troy. Like, lots of people. This death and sorrow and all of the tragedy that befell these people has certainly left behind a dark mark. Now, many people believe that these ruins are possessed by some evil and ancient spirits. The spirits of these fallen Trojan soldiers, the ones that were betrayed by the infamous Trojan horse. There is some incredible history here, and I certainly wouldn't want to tell you not to go and see it, but just be wary if you do. Number 4 on this list is Chernobyl. This one wasn't necessarily lost to time, but mainly human error. Now, if you go there though, the entire place looks completely sucked of all of its life, and frankly, it looks possessed. Specifically, the city of Pripyat is the one that got it the worst. Back in the 80s, the Chernobyl power plant went wrong and everything got destroyed. The initial explosion was bad and killed a decent amount of people, but the big problem was the radiation. The radiation was nothing like we'd ever seen before. It's more than 30 years after the initial disaster and people still can't even go here for extended periods of time. The insane amount of death that took place here and the crippling impact that time has had on this place has left a lot of people believing that it's possessed. In fact, people have even even taken it a step further, and some think that this could be a hiding place for the devil. Perhaps the devil was even the cause of the initial disaster in the first place, got everyone out of here, and has now claimed it as his evil lair. This is accompanied by rumors of demonic beasts running rampant throughout the area. Some people who have been brave enough to trek through here after the accident have reported seeing creatures that are unlike anything we know of. These things, whatever they are, could be servants of the devil or could be caused by the insane amount of radiation that's around this area. Radiation has been known to cause mutations, and it wouldn't be surprising if some of the animals here have mutated in some capacity. I think it's safe to say that this place is at least possessed by death, so I'd stay away if I was you. Number 3 on this list is Memphis. No, I am not referring to the United States Memphis. This Memphis is located in Egypt. The National Geographic says, Memphis, founded around 3100 BC, is the legendary city of Mins, the king who united Upper and Lower Egypt. Early on, Memphis was more likely a fortress from which Menes controlled the land and water routes between Upper Egypt and the Delta. By the 3rd dynasty, Saqqara had become a sizable city. It fell successively to Nubia, Assyria, Persia, and Macedonia under Alexander the Great. Its importance as a religious center was undermined by the rise of Christianity and then of Islam. It was abandoned after the Muslim conquest of Egypt in 640 AD. Its ruins include the Great Temple of Ptah, royal palaces, and a colossal statue of Ramses II. Nearby are the pyramids of Saqqara. So clearly there has been a lot of important Egyptian and honestly world history that went on here. So why did it eventually get forgotten about? Well, lots of people have pointed to a possession of some kind. Some people have theorized that prior to Alexander the Great taking it over, the previous rulers put a curse upon the city if it fell to another ruler. Poor crop yields and just overall bad luck would come to the new rulers of this land, and eventually they'd have to leave the city. Whether this is true or not, we're never gonna really know, but some people who have visited the ruins have spoken about the paranormal presence that they felt. Many of them have reported something just feeling off. They haven't been able to necessarily put their finger on it, but it's as if some sort of presence is constantly watching them. Maybe this place is actually possessed. Number 2 on this list is the SS Airfield. This is one of the most interesting and creepy stories I've ever heard, honestly. Interesting Engineering says, Homebush Bay used to be home to various shipbreaking operations during the mid-20th century. Various wrecked hulls remain in the area, including the most famous of them, the SS Airfield. The ship was built and launched from the UK in 1911 and later registered as SS Airfield in Australia in 1912 as a steam collier. It transported supplies during World War II and returned to service as a steam collier post-war until it was decommissioned in 1972. Most of its superstructure was reclaimed and scrapped during the 1970s, but shipbreaking operations ceased in the same decade, leaving the hull to float ominously in the bay. Nature has since reclaimed the ship, creating an amazingly beautiful yet creepy abandoned shipwreck. So now we just have this super creepy boat floating around with no one manning it or doing anything. Tons of people have speculated throughout the years that there is some type of ghostly presence that lives here now. That throughout the time that this ship has been abandoned and left to rot, a spirit of some type has come and taken over the ship, and now we're not going to be getting it back anytime soon. I'm kind of cool with that, honestly. As long as the spirit minds its business and we don't bother it, kind of cool having a floating ghost ship, you know? Number 1 on this list is the Pacific Submarine Fleet. This is a submarine base located in Russia that was actually initially supposed to be for nukes. Interesting Engineering says, the Pavlovsk Soviet-era nuclear submarine base was built between the 1960s, was abandoned and left unfinished in the 1980s. It's thought to have been built to serve as a nuclear bunker to protect the Soviet Union's precious nuclear submarines. The base features 2 large tunnels to house submarines with a maze of much smaller ones for personnel. Today, it still remains abandoned and can often be found with frozen water in the submarine docking areas.
This place is super creepy apparently, and a lot of people have talked about those smaller tunnels having something in there that you wouldn't want to run into. It just feels fitting though that an abandoned base in Russia, like fully in the middle of nowhere, would have something evil about it. No one knows exactly what is possessing this space, but they're pretty sure that something is there for sure. There have even been rumors of some people going to investigate this place a few decades ago and never returning. Number 5 on this list is Room 39. Room 39 is located in North Korea and might just be the most secretive place in all of North Korea. Business Insider says, in the words of journalist Kelly Olson, Room 39 is one of the most secret organizations in arguably the world's most secretive state. Created in the late 1970s, Room 39 is said to be located inside the Workers' Party building in Pyongyang, taking its name, according to some sources, from the office it occupied at the party headquarters in its early days. Although there isn't much official information on the room due to the secrecy of its activities, it's believed that it raises funds through commercial enterprises, both legal and illegal, with activities ranging from counterfeiting to the sale of gold, or weapons. This network of companies present in various parts of the world is estimated to have been able to contribute up to $2 billion a year to North Korea. It's speculated that Room 39 could be behind the sophisticated counterfeiting of $100 supernote bills that were issued over decades. It's really hard to write on this room because it literally is so secret. Like, I truly have absolutely no idea what goes on in Room 39 or who's in Room 39. All I know is that it probably exists in North Korea and that we do not want to be a part of it. I have to imagine that entering that room is pretty much a death sentence. Everything going on in there would be so top secret that leaving the area alive would be near impossible. Now, don't get me wrong, it would be very cool to see who's in this room and what they're actually up to. Big organized crime like this, when the government is involved and corporations are a part of it, that's super interesting and I would love to know more. But ultimately, the juice isn't worth the squeeze on this one, so stay away from Room 39 in North Korea. Not like you'd actually be able to get in there anyways though, because it's North Korea, but still. Number 4 on this list is Snake Island. Look, I like snakes, guys, or at least I'm not overtly scared of them. But at some point there needs to be a line, and going to Snake Island would definitely be crossing that line. Business Insider says, located about 100 kilometers off the coast of Sao Paulo, this island might seem the ideal exotic spot in which to lose yourself. But the truth is that for decades, the place has been uninhabited due to having been completely invaded by lethal snakes. Between 1 and 5 snakes per square meter inhabit the island. And if that isn't terrifying enough, it's worth noting that the snakes that live here are one of the most venomous in the world. The golden lancehead viper can reach up to half a meter in length, and with a strong, fast-acting venom can dissolve the flesh around its bites. It's for this reason the Brazilian government expressly forbids visiting the island. Think about that, folks. This island is straight up so deadly that for your own safety, the government forbids you from going. The Smithsonian says these vipers' venom can kill a person in under an hour, and numerous local legends tell of the horrible fates that awaited those who wandered onto the shores of Snake Island. Rumor has it that a hapless fisherman landed onto the island in search of bananas, only to be discovered days later in his boat, dead in a pool of blood with snake bites on his body. From 1909 to the 1920s, a few people did live on the island in order to run its lighthouse. But according to another local tale, the last lighthouse keeper, along with his entire family, died when a cadre of snakes slithered into his home through the windows. Unless you have a death wish, don't go to Snake Island. Number 3 on this list is North Sentinel. North Sentinel seems like a beautiful island to visit on the outside, but there's actually something very unique going on here. Business Insider says, while the rest of the islands in this archipelago are somewhat larger and better known, North Sentinel, full of mangroves and surrounded by coral, has remained virtually untouched by the outside world. It might sound like paradise, but the island couldn't be further from it. While its geography makes it one of the most isolated places on Earth, it is inhabited by one of the world's few remaining uncontacted tribes. The indigenous people of this island, referred to as the Sentinelese, have had practically no influence from the modern world. Throughout history, encounters with the population have been met with violence. In 2006, they killed 2 fishermen whose boat had been dragged by the current to their shores. According to The Guardian, a 3-mile restriction zone prevents visitors from entering the territory. According to Survival, an NGO for the rights of indigenous and tribal peoples, the Indian government has abandoned any plans to contact the Sentinels. The entire tribe could be wiped out by diseases to which they have no immunity, which is why authorities respect their wish to remain uncontacted. This is truly insane if you think about it. Literally an entire society on an island with hardly any knowledge of the outside world at all. Like, I wonder what they know about and what they don't know about. Do they know about technology? Do they know where they are on the planet? Do they know about other countries that exist around them? And also, how do they get food and water? What are their houses like? What's the everyday lifestyle of somebody living here like? What language do they speak? These are all questions that I think a lot of people would love to know the answers to, but it's just impossible to actually find out without encroaching on their territory. This could prove dangerous for those who go there, and then also dangerous to the people who live there themselves. So for everyone's safety, we just need to let it be. Number 2 on this list is Bangar Fort. This fort is located in India and is definitely one of the country's most haunted locations. Between Jaipur and Alwar in Rajasthan lie the ruins of what was once a splendid kingdom. The fort was built by the ruler of Amber Kachawaha for his youngest son in 1573, and gradually its population dwindled until 1783, when a strong famine forced the villagers still living there to flee. Local legends state that the reason for the kingdom falling into ruin was that the fort was cursed. As the only legally recognized haunted place in India, according to the Times of India, a government permit is required to be able to enter before dawn or after sundown. Although it's said that the reason is down to wild nocturnal animals such as tigers and the lack of artificial lighting in the area, no one knows what else could be lurking in the ruins. Literally, this place is legally recognized as being cursed. There are very few places in the world where the government has actually claimed that it's cursed, but this is one of them. I know that you have to be on the lookout for tigers and other wild animals, but if this place is truly haunted, as people suspect it is, then wild animals are going to be the least of your worries. This is an ancient fort. Who knows what type of death or evil things transpired here over the years? If it's actually cursed, then there could be so many different types of ghouls or creatures lurking down there, just waiting for some unsuspecting victim to come down. And number 1 on this list is Dulce Base. We often look at Area 51 as the big and scary base in America, but Dulce Base is right up there too as a place you probably should not go. Holidify says Dulce is a quaint town near the Colorado border in New Mexico. With a population of 2,600 Native Americans, this town serves as an underground laboratory where unbelievable experiments take place. It is said that the Dulce Base is a massive hidden compound that houses incredibly advanced technologies and human-animal hybrids. This base has very tight security and is regarded as one of the top forbidden places in the world and in the USA. Very recently we were talking about human-animal hybrids, and I brought up in that video how some of them might be hidden from the public. Human-animal hybrids have gotten a lot of backlash, so doing them in a top secret base where no one is watching might make more sense from a government standpoint. Whatever they are truly doing down here though, it's clear that if you go in, you're not going to be coming back out. If you don't have the proper clearance, then heading into this base would definitely be a death sentence. I, for one, don't want to be turned into a half-horse human being thing, so I'd stay away.
And coming in at number 5, we have the Houghton Mansion. Built in the 1890s in North Adams, Massachusetts, for the mayor himself, Albert Charles Houghton. This neoclassical revival-style mansion sits on 172 Church Street. A family man, Albert was the president of Arnold Print Works, a prominent textile factory in North Adams. His wife, Cordelia, daughter Mary, and himself had owned and lived on the property right up until the fatal car accident which took the lives of the family in 1914. On an early summer morning, Albert and his family, accompanied by another family, Dr. and Mrs. Dutton and their daughter, and of course the family chauffeur himself, Mr. Witters, had decided to head out into the countryside for a leisurely drive, a drive that ultimately took their lives. Unfortunately, for everyone on that August 1st morning, after a steep turn the car lost control and proceeded to screech off the road, resulting in a rolling fatal wreck. All the women in this tragedy losing their lives, with the men barely surviving from the multitude of injuries. On August 11th, just 10 days after the accident, without his wife and daughter, Albert mysteriously died in the home from what doctors think was a broken heart. It is said that 3 ghosts haunt the Houghton mansion, including Albert himself, Albert's daughter Mary, and the driver, Mr. Witters. The mansion remained with the Houghton family until 1926, when Albert's daughter Florence and her husband sold the building to the Freemasons. This is when the spookiness really started happening. Through its multitude of use throughout the years, additions to this historic site were added on by the Masons, using it for ritual and spiritual purposes, making this story even weirder. Over the years, there have been countless paranormal witnesses claiming that the ghosts roaming the halls of the basement, Mr. Witters himself, guilt-ridden with the responsibility of the crash, and Mr. Witters took his own life shortly after returning home with injuries, and residents that have stayed at the site have claimed that the manly figure aimlessly rummaging through the basement is the driver himself. Among these claims have another spirit lurking in Mary's bedroom. It is said that overnighters have witnessed multiple bright lights and auras flying around the bedroom in the middle of the night. I wouldn't even step foot into this house, let alone set up camp and spend the night. No way. The Houghton Mansion remains a tourist attraction and hotspot for paranormal goers worldwide, and to this day is one of the most haunted and mysterious sites in all of Massachusetts. Number 4. The Hoosick Tunnel. The Hoosick Tunnel, from the Algonquin word place of stones and the Mohawk word forbidden, is a 4.75-mile active railroad tunnel in western Massachusetts that passes through the Hoosick Range, an extension of Vermont's Green Mountains, and runs from Deerfield River in the town of Florida to the city of North Adams. The construction began in 1815 and ending in 1875 with a budget of $2 million, at the time the largest tunnel ever constructed, and it was later the result of taking lives of over 200 men during its construction entirety, earning it the nickname from locals, the Bloody Pit. This haunted, barren 5-mile, completely enclosed stretch was subject to multiple accidents and deaths over the years, giving the tunnel its haunting history and reputation of being cursed itself. With the word forbidden, did the Mohawks know something that the workers didn't? Essentially, this cold, underground, pitch-black hole became one of America's strangest grave sites, resulting in everything from mysterious gas leaks, dynamite explosions, roofs collapsing, and even mechanic failures resulting in a mass flood. For the past decades, there have been numerous paranormal activity witnesses who have documented strange events, from police officers to the freight conductors themselves. Some of the reports over the last 100 years included numerous farmers and wagons ending up in different areas of the railroad, missing hours of time. The farmers had claimed that when spending time around the railroad and its tracks, that memory and confusion would always set in. Some residents have claimed that they have even been chased out of the tunnel by an unexpected freight train chugging along aggressively through the tunnel like a bat out of hell, and then vanishing. Numerous ghostly figures resembling workers roam the dark tunnel, and if that isn't scary enough, some people, including hearing the echoes and screams of even the workers who were buried alive under the rock, still holding their tools, or even seeing ghostly figures in pumping chambers where numerous men tirelessly making rafts not to drown. The Hoosick Tunnel remains one of the most visited and haunted places, marking it just one of the sites you'll probably never find me at. Just in 2020, the tunnel was yet again subject to a mysterious collapse, resulting in months of repair. Yeah, I say stop fixing it and just let it be. Number 3. The USS Salem. Planes, trains, and automobiles. Well, almost. A big boat. The USS Salem, a heavy cruiser built for World War II in 1945, was originally built for action. Its bold, aggressive architecture was one of the last, as it was more of a bluff to its opponents than actually a hero of war. In May 1949, War Departments handed the Salem's helm to Captain J.C. Daniel himself. The ship was built and updated with what was then the latest military tech and weapons, and it was meant to strike fear in whomever or whatever was in her way. Although the ship wasn't used in any action during World War II, it acted as a flagship, training operation, and main purpose as a threat to the naval enemy. It wasn't until the USS Salem had responded to the 1953 Ionian earthquake, or also known as the Great Kefalonia earthquake, as it hit the southern Ionian islands of Greece on August 12th, devastating the entire area. The USS Salem landed on Greek shores and acted as an improvised hospital and morgue, giving it its famous name, the Sea Witch. The ship was decommissioned shortly after its rescue and lays in Boston's harbor as a tourist attraction from all of its dark history. Some of the paranormal activities that arise on the ship include the Burning Man, who smells of rank death and can be seen in the mess hall where the bodies have been stored. Another famous apparition on the ship is the ghost girls who lurk the halls of the ship. Little ghostly figures can be seen and felt on the legs of tour goers. Some people claim that the ship is even home to hellhounds, an aggressive pack of ghostly creatures that roam the ship growling and scratching at closed doors. Yeah, the next time my dog scratches at my door, she's going up for adoption. I'm sorry. Number 2, the Lizzie Borden House. This quaint bed and breakfast located at 230 2nd Street is home to one of America's most haunted and mysterious homes. The Lizzie Borden House gets its haunt from an unsolved murder of Lizzie Borden in 1892. One of the most infamous true crime figures known for her murdering of her father and stepmother with several blows to the head with a hatchet. Oof, ouch. Although acquitted, the killings remain unsolved to this day. This case earned notoriety and much that the popular local children's rhyme had been linked to this death. Lizzie Borden took an axe and gave her mother 40 whacks. When she saw what she had done, she gave her father 41. That is horrible. On August 4th, 1892, Lizzie's stepmother of 27 was struck 19 times while her father Andrew was hit 11. Although Lizzie Borden was acquitted and found not guilty, the dark history draws in crowds every night for its nightly tour of the premises. The Lizzie Borden room, the infamous room where all of the murders took place, is the most requested and most popular for paranormal overnighters. And not only can you enjoy a lovely inclusive breakfast to yourself, but the nightly house tour, ghost tour, and ghost hunt attracts fans of horror every night of the year. Yeah, that's terrifying. And there's a jingle to it. I don't like that at all. And coming in at number 1, the Salem witch trials. We can't talk about haunted places in Massachusetts if we're not going to bring up the witch trials. And I'm not talking about Sabrina the Teenage Witches or anything of cute of that nature. These famously documented witch trials need no introduction, and unfortunately lays way to one of the most horrific events based in truth. The site of mass hysteria and hangings of supposed witches took place here and occurred in colonial Massachusetts between 1692 and 1693. More than 200 people were accused of practicing witchcraft, or better known back then as the devil's magic, and 20 were ultimately executed. Eventually, the colony admitted the trials were a mistake and compensated the families of those convicted. Okay, yeah, sorry. I just thought when you sneezed, you didn't say bless you, so I already don't like you, so I figured you were a witch. I'm really sorry. Since then, the story of the trials has become famous in paranoia and injustice, and it continues to baffle researchers to this day. We all know the famous play written by American playwright Arthur Miller in 1953, The Crucible, depicting the mass hysteria and drama during these trials. This was the perfect time if you didn't like someone that a strategic and untimely sinister accusation led to the demise of thy neighbor. I saw Sarah Good with the devil. I saw Goody Osborne with the devil. Who else don't I like? I saw Bridget Bishop with the devil. Abigail. End of Act 1. Since the start of the trials and hysteria in North America, other European countries shortly followed with their own mass witch hunts, resulting in somewhere between 40,000 and 60,000 tried and executed for witchcraft. That's a lot of broomsticks. The Salem witch trials of Salem, Massachusetts, is still one of the world's biggest hotspots for mystery and paranormal story.
Number 5 on this list is Villa Paula. This haunted place is located in Miami and has quite the interesting guest in the backyard. Thrillist says, this stately white mansion was originally constructed as the Cuban consulate in the mid-1920s, home to Consul Domingo Millard and his wife, Paula. The Cuban-born Paula was known to spend her days playing piano and drinking Cuban coffee until she died from complications from a leg amputation in 1932. Legend has it that Domingo interred his late wife in a sarcophagus laid in the backyard. The sarcophagus is still there now, covered by ficus tree roots and nearly impossible to reach. Whether or not it actually contains her mortal remains is debatable at best, but reports of her ghost persist. It's said her ghost is in different rooms there, says History Miami's Dr. Paul George. People who've lived at Villa Paula since have had existential kinds of experiences. Among them, phantom coffee smells and piano playing, a one-legged woman roaming about as well. So there is a literal sarcophagus just chilling in this person's backyard. Can you imagine having that just show up up on the house listing, I'd be like, no, we are not okay with that. I'm kind of surprised that no one has gone to go deal with the sarcophagus before. I mean, you can't just leave this thing down there like that and expect the ghost to just go away. I would imagine that Paula's spirit is probably tied to the sarcophagus, and in turn it's tied to the area. Granted, I do kind of understand why no one wants to dig it up. Think about all the crazy stuff that's happened with the pyramids. You dig up this sarcophagus and you might end up being cursed for life, which is obviously something that nobody wants. But now we're left in this awkward place where we can't get rid of the ghost, but at the same time can't live here either. That's why I'm recommending to all of you watching, just avoid Villa Paula altogether. Number 4 on this list is the Blue Anchor Pub. So this is an interesting one because this pub didn't actually start in Florida. Thrillist says this pub was built in 1840s London during Jack the Ripper times, so it should be no surprise that it's haunted. The story goes that the bar was raised in London, but its wooden interiors were sent to New York City and then onto this sleepy Florida town in 1996. Little did anyone know that the pub's original elements came with the ghost of Bertha Starkley, a cheating wife who was murdered by her husband. Today, she can be heard rattling pots, knocking things over, and wailing in the middle of the night at the Blue Anchor. Every night around 10 p.m., the time that she was murdered, Bertha likes to remind everyone she's still here, so the current owners ring the ship's bell to scare her away. So, first thing, I've never actually heard of that before, where they take a building from one continent and then just decide to move it over to another continent. This bar must look pretty cool on the inside to go to all that trouble though. Obviously, this was a bit of a mistake and everyone would have been better served if we relocated this thing straight to the dump. Bertha doesn't care if it's in London or America or anywhere. As long as the structure of this pub is still intact, her ghost will still be floating around, which makes it very hard to enjoy a night out at this place. Like, imagine drowning several pints, going to take a piss, and then getting ambushed by some 1800s ghost in the bathroom with your pee-pee hanging out. Like, I don't know if I'd ever be able to recover from that, folks. Number 3 on this list is St. Augustine's Lighthouse. Ah yes, the haunted lighthouse, a true classic. Thrillist says St. Augustine's iconic lighthouse is a Florida landmark built in 1874. But climb up its 219 steps, and it's not just the views that will take your breath away. First, there's the ghost of Joseph Andrew, the original lighthouse keeper who fell to his death while painting the 165-foot tower. Then there are the Pity's 2 daughters who were playing with a building cart when it broke loose and slid into the nearby bay, drowning them both. While the girls giggle and run up and down the lighthouse steps, Joseph has been reported smoking cigars at the top of the lighthouse, keeping watch over his forever home. You know guys, if I had to be a ghost, then being Joseph wouldn't be the worst. I get to look out at the pretty scenery at the top of my lighthouse where hardly anyone bothers me, and I get to smoke cigars all day. Like, obviously I wouldn't want to be a ghost, but if I had to be, then this wouldn't be that bad. Either way, I'm not a ghost now. I am very much a human being, and if I want to stay a human being, then I recommend avoiding this place. It can obviously be very jarring to see 2 little ghost girls running around, and even though all of these ghosts are supposed to be pretty chill, we know that the paranormal can be unpredictable. I'm sure that there are tons of other non-haunted Florida lighthouses around if you're really pining for a good view. Number 2 on this list is Fort East Martello. If you don't like dolls, then you really won't like this one, guys. Thrillist says if there is one rule all Floridians follow, it's do not mess with Robert the doll. The 4-foot figurine has terrorized anyone who hasn't taken him seriously since he was gifted to artist Robert Jean Otto in 1904. Otto blamed any mischievous act around him on Robert the doll, effectively coining the oft-repeated "Robert did it" mantra. The doll currently holds court inside Fort East Martello, where he lives inside a glass case surrounded by a constant soundtrack of haunting xylophone music. The room evokes a heavy air immediately upon entering, and the walls are papered with apology notes from cocky tourists who've dared cross the world's most haunted plaything. Even the Prince of Darkness himself, Ozzy Osbourne, felt Robert's wrath when he suffered a series of health mishaps shortly after dissing the doll on his reality show. I don't like dolls, folks, especially the haunted variety, so this entry obviously had to make the list. Clearly it curses you after you see it because people literally have to come back here and ask for its forgiveness. I don't know if the notes work or not, but I guess that's all you can do when you're dealing with a haunted doll. Hopefully this doll can just chill out and stop haunting people, but in the meantime, I just flat out avoid going to this place in Florida altogether. And number 1 on this list is Casa Monica Resort and Spa. It really sucks that this place is so haunted because it's truly beautiful. Thrillist says St. Augustine's fanciest hotel is also its most haunted. In fact, this 5-star Mediterranean revival haunt is a hotbed of spectral activity. Children are heard running along the 4th floor, but no one is there. The radio in the Ponce de Leon suite randomly comes on, but no one's there. Guests of room 411 wake up to people staring at them, but no one's there. But it's the 3-story Flagler suite high in the tower that's most haunted. Maids have seen a child's handprint appear on the 1st floor bathroom mirror, and after knocking, one heard a man say, "We've been expecting you," from an empty bedroom. Its spookiest claim to fame, however, is the male ghost staring out of the top tower window. He's believed to be the ghost of one of 2 people, either Franklin Smith, the architect who built the hotel, or Henry Flagler, the man who purchased it. I personally don't care if it's the architect, the man who purchased it, or God. Anyone who says, "I've been waiting for you as I enter an empty bedroom," it's not the type of individual I want to be around. Also, where are these children coming from and what are those sounds? Okay, so you want to tell me a scary story where the architect of the building fell in love with his work and then when he died, his ghost stayed here. Alright, fine, I can buy that, I can believe that, but like, what are the children doing here? What do they have to do with this place and the architect? Maybe this is just one of those spots where it doesn't matter what happened here, it doesn't matter what will happen here in the future, it's just always destined to be haunted.